The music masterclass today, Thursday, February 18th. And this is my weekly series of these masterclasses where we talk about making music. Many of you know me from the MuseScore Cafe, where we talk about using MuseScore, and yeah, we'll create music along the way. And here it's kind of the other way around. We'll create music and yeah, maybe use MuseScore along the way. So that's my story. And as I mentioned yesterday in the cafe, I want a theme song for this too. And so I'm that's my challenge for myself is I got to create myself some theme music. And I don't have any great ideas. And I've got some ideas. I don't have a clear idea in my head of what I think the theme music might actually sound like. But we'll see. Hopefully, in the next couple of weeks, I'll have something together. So some of the things people have been submitting, I want to take a look at. And as always, I just want to talk about some things that are on my mind and do some demonstrations and so forth. So what I mentioned that I want to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about ragtime music. And I'm just checking my volume and everything here. Okay, good. Um, I want to talk a little bit about ragtime music, in particular because February is Black History Month in the United States, and I'm a jazz musician, and often I might talk about jazz. Ragtime is not jazz; it's composed music, or at least typically it's composed music. But it's definitely some of the music that is influences jazz, and jazz borrows a lot of sounds from ragtime music. But there's a lot of things you can talk about. Oh yeah, I should talk about Chick Corea some too, right? So Chick Corea, as people know, is a jazz pianist who just died recently, and kind of unexpectedly. I mean, he had cancer, so I guess it wasn't expected if you knew that, but I didn't know that. So anyhow, yeah, we'll see if we can maybe. I don't have anything prepared to talk about with Chick, but maybe I'll think about that for next week. Um, yeah, I'll think about that. So what I did want to do is I'm going to bring up this particular Scott Joplin score that I have ready, and so this Scott Joplin wrote a ton of music, and I think I'm going to go with the Entertainer here because it's probably the maybe the most well-known of his pieces. It's certainly one of the most well-known pieces. And this is a really nice transcription that someone did. By transcription, I mean they just took the sheet music and entered it in a MuseScore, but I think they did a really nice job of it. James Brigham, I believe, is the person. So I'm just going to play this music for you, but I am going to turn off the repeats are already off. Okay, good. So where it does mean because the music is repetitive. I'm just going to play you the piece and talk about it. One of the things you'll notice is the form of this, like a lot of ragtime pieces, it's got a bunch of different sections, say 16 bars each. And really the sections can be very, very different from each other. They often don't relate, and often we don't come back. And like after you leave one section, you don't necessarily come back to it. So in this sense, it could be unlike what you might be used to in a lot of classical music with, say, sonata form, where there's the recapitulation of the original theme. The original theme might come back, but we probably won't end with anything resembling it. So anyhow, that said, let's listen. Uh, okay, let's listen. I didn't hear anything, did you? All righty then. Um, what could be going on? So I love it when I get to spend this time thinking about this kind of stuff rather than what I would want to be talking about. But uh, I'm just going to try some things that I know because I was messing with some sound settings earlier. That is just not playing. Well, that's interesting. So, Yeah, and there's all sorts of wonderful black composers that I could talk about. And one of the reasons actually that I focused on Scott Joplin was, it's one thing to be a black composer, but writing in a more, European style. And it's another thing to actually like really innovate as far as bringing in some of the African experience to that. And that is one of the things. I'm not saying William Grant still didn't do that also, but that's one of the really unique things about ragtime music is really one of the first expressions in composed in the realm of composed music of someone really not just Scott Joplin himself, but him and his contemporaries really defining a new genre of music with very specific African influences. Okay, so this is very disturbing to me. Um, so my plan B is going to be go to the piano, but then I'm not going to try to play. Why would I not be hearing anything? Um, so, hello everyone. Again, I'm going to come back and try this again because I did just reboot also, and you never know what happens after a reboot, but it was after a system update, and that's could be a bad sign, right? Um, there's just no sound. There's just no sound. Um, so I apologize for needing to be fumbling around here, but we'll see if I can get something happening here. What if instead of ALSA, what if I switch to pulse audio? That sometimes works. All right. This is bothersome. I can't imagine that the workspace has anything to do with it. What could be going on? So, this is disturbing. All right. It appears that for whatever reason, I'm not going to. So I did just hit that restart button. I didn't the previous time. But I'm going to hit it again. I'm trying to think. Man, there's just no sound. All right. So I might have to go with just a complete plan B here. So you might have to just bear with me as I go to my plan B. Um, so, the thing is, I don't have a system mixer the way speaker internal, microphone internal. Um, yeah, this is very bizarre. I am going to try plugging in my headphones. Not that I expect that to help. No, it is not helping. All right. I rather than take all of this time uh, dealing with technical issues, I'm going to go. I'm calling an audible here. Calling an audible, and as it were, calling a non-audible. And I'm going to come over to my keyboard, and we're going to talk about music that way because that's what I got for you. So, uh, yeah, don't know what's going on exactly here. Um, so let me think. I'm going to. Yeah, I don't have any MIDI input, so that's normal. So the question is, if I play this now, I don't have my external microphone plugged in, but I could. But did that sound okay? Was that an all right sound there? If so, then I'm going to go with that. Otherwise, I'll get more stuff plugged in here. Um, so I'm going to bring up the entertainer and just talk through some stuff about it, and then go from there. Because well, why not? It's what I can do, and then I get to solve more problems later. Yeah, probably it's related to the operating system update that I just did, and I need to figure out what's going on. I should figure out if I have sound. Um, elsewhere, like on MuseScore.com. If I go to MuseScore.com, will I have audio? All right, so sounds like that was there. All right, okay, good. So I'm gonna go to the master class, and we're gonna see if when I play a score here, if we're gonna have sound from it. So this was a score that was just posted by someone who just posted his very first score, one of his first compositions ever. I was thinking I might talk about this next week, but since it was the easiest thing to get to, I'm going to just hit the play button just to see if I'm going to have audio there. But meanwhile, let's see. Let's find out. Am I going to have... All right, so apparently I do have audio on my system, just not within MuseScore. So that is very good to know. Excellent to know. In fact, what that tells me is that, if I loaded up the entertainer on MuseScore.com, that would work. But, I am going to just do piano because why not? I'm a pianist, right? I can sight read. So I'm not going to play the whole thing. I'm going to talk about some aspects of it. So I'm going to start here at the beginning, not the beginning. Oh, the beginning is this, right? I think I cheated an octave on there. Yeah, I did. Okay. That is an introduction. And almost all of these pieces are going to have some sort of introduction that doesn't necessarily relate to anything else. And then we have our first theme, right? I'm trying to like read sideways. So if I put the laptop here, you wouldn't be able to see my keys. So I'm turning sideways. That's just the way it is. This just is awkward, but whatever. And then, right, that's melody. I'm not going to try to play the whole thing because I can't turn sideways and do this and sight read and all that. But what I will do is point out aspects of it. This melody right here, you get off the bat, is highly syncopated. And one of the hallmarks of ragtime music, and really what kind of gives the ragged aspect to it, is the idea of syncopation. So I have in the past every once in a while talked about what syncopation might actually mean. And let me just give you a quick kind of definition of syncopation. And I'm going to do that with reference to a couple of rhythms here. And I'm going to do it in 2/4, like, no, not clefs, sorry, time signatures. I'm going to make this thing be in 2/4, and I'm going to show you something. There are 8 rhythms, and I talk about this periodically, but it really bears repeating because it's an incredibly important piece of information. That these 8 rhythms that I'm about to put on here are really the building block of all rhythms. All rhythms you could see as potentially being related to one of these 8. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm missing 4/8 notes, and I'm missing 1/8, 1/4, 1/8. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and we have bum bum, and we have ba and we have ba and we have bum ba bum, and we have ba ba bum, and we have ba 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 ba, and we have ba ba ba. I think the last time I talked about these, I used the takadimi syllables. So ta, and then takadi, and takadimi, and taka, takadimi, and takadi, and takadimi, and taka-mi. These are the syllables that go with this using that system. These rhythms right here, the ones that have ka, ta, ka, without also having a mi. This is what how I described it before. And if you look at ragtime music, that rhythm, this one that has ka, it has the and of one, but it doesn't have two. That right there is the syncopated rhythm. Of all syncopated rhythms in the world, when you see this note on the and of one, not followed by something on two. This is the prototypical example of a syncopated rhythm. And it's exactly what we see here, except here it's divided in half. Instead of eighth, quarter, eighth, it's 16th, eighth, 16th. But the ratios are the same, right? So that bit of syncopation, that fact that this C comes on the second one of those four. So like in my example here, if I take this and do another version of it where it's divided in half, then that same rhythm is now 16th, 8th, 16th. This is all those same rhythms divided in half. So this rhythm, ba-ah, it's the same rhythm, ba-ba-ah, or ba-ba-ah, just a different tempo, right? This one, ba-ba-ba, or ba-ba-ah, and this one is ba-ba-ah, at a slower quarter note tempo. It's the same rhythm and the same concepts apply. So that syncopation is one of the things that makes ragtime ragtime, is use of rhythms like that. But also then we have this rhythm. Now there's nothing about eighth and 2/16 that's inherently syncopated, because I could go bum ba ba bum ba ba bum ba ba bum 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 ba ba bum ba ba bum ba ba bum, and there's nothing syncopated about any of that. Bum ba ba bum ba ba bum ba ba bum. It's the fact that there's a note on the last one of those, the mi, right? The last 16th of the group is the fact that there's a note on the last 16th of the group that's then not followed by one on the next downbeat. That's what makes it syncopated. And so syncopations, and that'll happen when you have a rest at the beginning of a pattern or a tie coming out of the last note of a pattern. So anytime you see ties within a measure like this, or like here, we have 4/16 notes. Nothing syncopated about 4/16 notes. I could do this all day long and no one would accuse me of syncopation. It's the fact that I went boop 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 bum ba doo dum and this one on the or on the mi of taka di mi without a ta that follows, or one e and without a two. The fact that there's a note at the end of the group that's not immediately followed by one on the start of the next group. That's what creates syncopation. And so here you're getting to see a pattern. This one, that C is always syncopated. There's no way to play that pattern and not have it be syncopated. This pattern, the eighth and 2/16, is syncopated if it's not followed by a note on the beat. And same with this pattern, 4/16. It's syncopated if it's not followed by something on the beat. And that's what you'll see ragtime music doing all the time. Just within the case of these first three measures, I've got one syncopation there, a second syncopation here, and a third syncopation here. That's three syncopations in three measures. Yeah, that's a lot of syncopation as far as this goes. And they're kind of oddly spaced. One of these syncopations was at the beginning of the first measure, one was at the very end of the second measure, and one was in the middle, or the end of the first measure going into the second, and the next one was in the middle of the third. So the syncopations themselves were kind of unevenly spaced. And I talked about that when I talked about syncopation before. Oh yeah, there's a three. I'll come back to that in a second. It's not exactly 3 against 4, but I know what you mean. So the fact that the syncopations are not equally spaced, because if the whole piece was, it would cease to be as syncopated in some abstract sense. I mean, yes, I could say every single measure, every single beat had a syncopation in it. I guess that's really syncopated. But it became a predictable syncopation. And part of what makes this feel as ragged as it does is the syncopations are not just plentiful, but they're scattered in slightly not random, but not as predictable as that. Now, Samuel makes a really great point here about what he calls 3 against 4, and what I think you're referring to is what I would call a hemiola. Boop bum, boop bum, boop bum. Right, this figure is basically 3/16 long. It's 1/16 followed by an eighth, and then again it's a 16th followed by an eighth, and then it's a 16th followed by, well, something that's actually longer than an eighth, but still we got that pattern of 16th long, 16th long, 16th long, and it repeats every 3/16, right? If you superimposed some 16ths here, see, you can see by that superimposing that I just did, that first pattern there lasts for exactly 3/16. The next pattern lasts exactly 3/16. And the next pattern, lasts for 3/16 and then continues. But it repeats every 3/16. Ba, boo-dum, boo-dum. If you didn't know better and someone just went boo-dum, 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 you might have thought the piece was in 3. Boo-dum, boo-dum, boo-dum. You might have thought the bum was the downbeat. Like 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That's might be what you would have thought if that's all you heard was. That's 3/4 or 3/8 or whatever it is. That's in 3. So this pattern here, do dum, boo bum, is a very 3-oriented pattern. It's repeating every 3/16 notes, and yet it's sorry about that. So that the first time the E comes in with the downbeat here of the pattern, the next E comes in the crack between the 2 eighth notes. The third E comes in the second eighth note of that little pattern there, of that 2 eighth pattern. So it keeps kind of turning the beat around. That is called a hemiola. Hemiola is a technique that, it's definitely way older than Scott Joplin. Chopin loved hemiolas too, and although Chopin and Scott Joplin were kind of contemporaries, yeah. I don't know when their most active composing period is, but not that far different historically. The point here being that that pattern of this 3 against 4, as Samuel put it, it's 3/16, but kind of superimposed over a pattern that's based on 4/16. Usually, if I said 3 against 4. I'm not very good at it, but I'm literally playing 4/16 and playing 3. I'm literally doing 3/16 in the same time that I'm doing 3 triplets. When we talk about 3 against 4, usually we usually mean something more like that. So this type of 3 against 4 is really just a shifting. The 16ths line up. One of them's a group of 3 that repeats, and the other's a group of 4 that repeats. I don't know if that made sense, but in any case, so that's called a hemiola. And hemiola isn't necessarily a defining feature of ragtime in general. It's more the syncopation that is, but this piece certainly starts off with that very prominent hemiola. I see. So Scott Joplin died in 1917, but this piece was like from 1899, I believe, is when it was written. So late 1800s, and Chopin died not long before that, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't know if when Scott Joplin started composing, if Chopin was still alive. But if not, we're only talking a discrepancy of 10 years or something like that. Okay, so I almost picked Solace actually as my example. but I just figured I wanted something peppier. But Solace is a beautiful piece. It's really one of my favorites. So yeah, it's got its own, he calls it a Mexican thing, but it doesn't really sound Mexican, but there is something a little more Latin sounding about the rhythms in Solace. But really, it's a lot of the same rhythms, right? I forget the pitch. I'd have to look it up. But the same guy actually has the thing. It's like da 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 da. It's right, that kind of rhythm that happens. So it was the same guy, James Brigham, had a whole series of Scott Joplin things, and everything is being really slow on my system today, which isn't uncommon while I'm broadcasting, but it seems even more so perhaps right now. And maybe this is related to whatever is going on with my sound. But here we go. Yeah, there it is. The melody is a steady stream of 16th notes, but with that tie, just like the entertainer had. The tie from the last group of each four into the next. The thing that's tango-ish about it, or really a lot of different Latin rhythms, is this boom, 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 mm, 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 mm. Right? That's the part that feels tango-ish. And again, he calls it a Mexican serenade because, yeah, I think there's any number of Latin American rhythms that have a similar thing. There's, of course, lots more things that could be going on in Latin American rhythms that maybe at some point I'll talk more about those. But the defining feature of this piece, as far as the accompaniment goes, is that instead of this steady stream of eighth notes, it's bum, boom, bum, 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 boom, bum, bum, as this sort of defining motor rhythm in the left hand. But the right hand is so active over that you're less aware, maybe, of that. Whereas most of his pieces, boom, 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 or however that the piece goes, that sort of back and forth thing. Okay, so that's some of the stuff that I want to talk about with talk about as far as Ragtime goes. So some of the defining features of it will be that, as I said, the form. I didn't play through the whole thing because I got flustered with all the technical problems. But what you would have found there, in fact, if we look at this piece here, this melody goes on and it's, 16 bars and then repeats. And then we have the second strain. So that strain is almost completely unrelated, and it goes on for, roughly 16 bars. Then we do get the initial theme back. I would say Scott Joplin's rags, generally speaking, do bring that A theme back once. So it'll be A, B, and then A. But then there's usually, after that A section, there'll be other stuff, and we might never hear the A again. Right? So there's this sort of C theme here, and it's basically 16 bars long. Now, the thing that's a little unique on this piece is this last theme here is actually quite related to the first theme. I mean, I think I feel like right. That theme feels more related to this theme, perhaps, than is typical. Like you won't always find this. And then that theme goes on and it repeats, and that's the end of the piece. So basically, the form was A, B, A, and then there's a C, totally unrelated. And then there was a D that was a hint at the A. Yeah, that's a kind of a typical ish theme, a typical ish form. And then typically you might find a key change in there. Like this piece, you'll notice it's notated the key of C to begin with. And it really is the key of C. But this piece is totally in the key 5-1 in the key of C. But then the next theme is really starts to feel like, oh, are we talking about the key of F maybe? No, I feel like that's just 4-1 in the key of C. And a little minor 4-1 because Scott Joplin loves that as much as I do. And he does that, and he's still in the key of C, but coming out of that section back to the C major section. But then there is an actual key change. Now we're in F chord, the key of F. So the piece moved from the key of the original key of C to the key of F, and in this case, it actually finishes in the key of F also, right? So it didn't end in the same key it started in. That would make it a little unusual by classical standards, but it's not that unusual by the standards of this kind of music, which is also based on like these kinds of forms that I'm talking about. That's march music. Don Philip Sousa music has similar kinds of form of these separate strains. There would be the trio strain in there, which is kind of what that C section maybe is. Um, all right. So, yeah, okay. I see some questions here about comments. Oh, so that's what Bruce was asking. Where are other places to get talking about? Yeah, there's all sorts of groups on MuseScore.com. There's a MuseScore composers group that's extremely active. In fact, if I go here in my list of groups that I am a member of, it's quite a long list because I join them at some point when someone asks me to, or when there's something that seems worth joining for. And then many of them I've never gone to again. But this one here, MuseScore Composers, is one of the most active groups there is, and is so active it might be overwhelming to go there because there's so many people and so much music there being posted. I kind of feel like this music masterclass is a little more focused kind of experience, perhaps. But you can see here there are 6,000 members, 28,000 pieces of sheet music that have been posted here, 4,000 discussions. That's over like 10 years. This discussion, there you go, was created just over 10 years. Since I now know that I can get sound out of MuseScore.com, I think I'm going to return to plan A of listening to Heiss's piece here that we talked about a little bit last week. And I said that, I wanted to get some feedback for him on this and provide some as well. And so it's this one here. Yeah, and I had it downloaded and ready to play in MuseScore. And for whatever reason, my audio is just not cooperating with that thought. So he's got the whole program here, right? It's about the approach of the pandemic, and he talks about very specifically how different motifs in the music. The ascending figure is, this is the leitmotif of the virus itself, and different parts of it meant to convey different aspects of things that happened, and so the whole piece is 5 minutes long. So what I'm going to do is just play the piece because I feel like a lot about this is stuff that has to do with the big picture, not so much the details of, oh, the syncopation in this measure or the way he resolved this note over here. A lot of it is big picture oriented stuff. So I'm going to hit the play button on this thing. And yeah, if I can't remember if there's any repeats in here, if I could turn them off, I would just to in the interest of time, but I'm just gonna hit the play on it. So here we go. All right. Beautiful job, guys. Really enjoy that piece. And I just love all the different things going on, all the kind of different textural things that are happening in here. So I looked at some comments in here, and there's comments about the overall sound of the piece, and the the feelings invoked by it, and so forth. There's not a whole lot of discussion, or really any discussion of sort of specifics of like, well, what about this feels like the virus, or what about it feels like a threat? There actually is that comment about whether it feels threatening, the threat of it. And Kika, I know you have a higher tolerance for dissonance probably than the average person in this in this grouping here, and so that probably influences things where, for some people, the mere presence of dissonance can sound threatening. To me, the threatening aspect of it would be uh, the insistence, the repetition of the thing starts to become ominous after a while for me. So a couple comments about the sound, since someone else mentioned about the sound font. I mean, synthesizers are synthesizers, and you can make the world's most perfect recording of a single trumpet playing an A, and the world's most perfect recording of a single trumpet playing an A of a B, and then you can put those back and forth really fast, and it's going to not sound at all like a real trumpet player going back and forth between A and a B, because the way the valves work, the way the sound flows through the instrument, it doesn't sound like A B A B A B. It's right. There's a thing that happens when that music is more than the sum of its parts in a very literal, real way, that you cannot take individual recordings of individual notes and assemble them and expect to get something that sounds really realistic. The way that a lot of systems that try to do better do is they will do things like change the attack on one note based on what happened before. Well, MuseScore doesn't have any of this kind of stuff going on. For MuseScore 4, we're hoping to get some of this stuff going, integrating with a program called Note Performer that's very good at that. But realistically, yeah, you can have the most perfect recording of individual notes, but when you use that to assemble a recording, it's just not going to be it's not going to be very convincing. And so you can spend a lot of time worrying about it, or you can choose to put that aside and say, you know what, it's let's talk about the music and not worry about the sound. If someone were coming to me playing a piano and playing a piano sonata on it they had written, I wouldn't be talking about how in tune or out of tune the piano was, or how long the strings were on the piano, and why it would have sounded better on a ground than an upright. I'd rather focus on the music. So I guess that's about as far as I'm going to go with this. I don't tend to think that much about the sound fonts, because it's too much work for too little benefit. The best sound font in the world sounds only barely better to me than the default, and so it's just not worth thinking about that much. So, some of the things that I noticed about this. So this theme, that ba-da-dum bump, right? That's obviously this theme that comes back, and I assume, I didn't actually even do the math on it, but I assume that's the one that he's talking about when he says you can hear the virus throughout the piece, the ascending figure. Oh, so 2/16, 1/8, due to okay, I see. Those are talking about 2/16, then an eighth note, and then a quarter note. So that figure, the ba da dum bump, obviously continues throughout. Now, under normal musical situations, I would say, well, boy, if you're going to have a repeating figure like that, I would personally like to hear it vary more throughout the piece, if it were a normal piece that were written for normal reasons. But knowing what I know about the program of the piece, knowing that it's meant to indicate that something about this virus, well, then it continues. Now, viruses mutate, and that could be your ace in the hole here. Say, well, maybe the mutation of the virus and all the different variations that show up, because I don't actually see that specifically mentioned. Um, uh, that the virus mutates, and that could be your program, by the way, is a word that's used in music to mean music to tell a story. Like if you think about the program that, the concert program, the piece of paper you get when you go to the concert that tells you about the piece. That's the program. So program music is music that is meant to have a story to it that's not inherent in the music that you would have to read separately. An opera isn't exactly program music because the lyrics tell the story. But if it's music that's trying to tell a story that you don't know the story until you read it separately, that's kind of what's normally meant by program music. So that's what this is. This is program music. This is the program. So I might be using the fact that we know the virus has mutated, and viruses do that, to introduce more variation. Now, there are variations, like here. That descending variation on it is really nice. That gives us some sort of musical um, relief from the insistence of that piece. And by the way, so concert band, my last experience in concert band was in high school, and I remember a composer who was pretty big at the time, David Holsinger, and I remember playing a couple pieces of his that something about this reminds me of. Um, and anyhow, guys, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but that would be someone to look up if you're not, just to see if um, in to see if any of his music appeals to you or gives you any ideas. There was one piece in particular I remember, Hopak Raskolniki, I think it was called. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, it was in 4/4, so those are just a repeating pattern of eighth notes. But there was something about the pattern that made it feel like it was in 5 or 7, and maybe that's because part of it was, and maybe it's because I'm confusing it in my mind with another one of his pieces that was in 5 or 7. And maybe I've got the wrong name on the wrong piece. Anyhow, David Holsinger, someone to perhaps let's just come on, clicky. I am clicking. All right, fine. I can't type into my own chat, but I can on my phone. David Holsinger. There we go. All right. Oh, ambulance. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so yeah, so the idea of the of how you're going to treat this ostinato figure, how much variation you're going to allow it to have. Um, this is all uh, personal decisions you get to make. And so I feel like because of the program, keeping it as constant as you did for at least most of the piece before, maybe at some point it becomes, it doesn't really make sense to talk about the mutation of it until deeper into the piece, right? And so already though we're going to have heard this figure a lot, and then the question is, what could you do to make things interesting? Well, one of the things that to me could be interesting about it, and you do this, you have all these textural changes, but like, okay, so when I say textural changes, like here, um, da, 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 da. It's this descending quarter note kind of line, and that's essentially the texture here. It's not descending everywhere, it goes up and down, but we get a basically flowing quarter note. Right? So we have that as a texture that's heard against the thing. And really, that's the same texture that we heard here, except here we had all these other eighth notes too. So having those extra eighth notes happening in there, and that percussion, that snare roll thingy, that is a different texture. But what I would observe about this is that tonally, it hasn't really changed. In other words, the pitch classes or the pitch sets that you're working with here, you have a key signature here, which, by the way, speaking of which, for me personally, I'm not uh I'm not big on putting key signatures on music that doesn't have a really strong tonal reason to have that key signature. And realistically, this is borderline to me. And so what I mean by that is I can clearly see that by having that key signature you have of basically three flats, right? You've got three flats in your key signature. Um, and I guess this is a concert pitch score because I see it's three flats across all the instruments here. Um, it's a concert pitch score, and you've got it three flats everywhere, and that allows you to not need accidentals. So therefore, from a practical perspective, yes, you've made the right choice giving it that key signature because it saves you a lot of accidentals. Because really, there's very few accidentals in this piece, right? There's very few. In fact, until you get to the, I mean, I'm scrolling through and seeing basically not a one until there was like a place towards the end where it wasn't even so much that I saw them as I heard them because my ears appreciated the change up that happened there. So to me, that is a maybe a missed opportunity here to introduce more variety tonally by having key changes, whether they're really key changes of key signature or just tonality changes as a way of further heightening some of these textural changes to have tonality changes. And then you would have the option of keeping the ostinato in the original key and having the other instruments shift to a new key center um, that creates a polytonality effect. To some extent, that happens. Okay, so here's where I see something happening. Yeah, that's exactly the spot. Right? This is where things start happening interestingly tonally. But at this point, measure 78, we're kind of getting to the home stretch a little bit. I mean, it's still got a ways to go, but it took a while before it got to that point, and it's it lives for as long as it lives, and then it becomes more diatonic again, starting here. Right? Now it's back to being our original kind of tonal center. Now there are little bits. Right, there's a little 151. There's like a little, what's I guess like a probably a minor 151 kind of thing going on here. I'd have to sort out exactly what's happening. E flat, C. So it's probably a C minor 151 that's happening in here. Um, uh, but yeah, I feel like there's an opportunity to tell more of a story through tonality. Now, one interesting that is happening here is within the sense of I'm calling this E flat or C minor, but is it? Or is it more modal than that? And Heist, maybe you could tell us if you had a thought to it. Like if I really go through this melody and think about what boodadum bum boodadum bum boodadum bum, that feels like 1 2 3 5 in a minor key. 1 2 flat 3 5. So I feel like that's establishing C minor as my tonal area. But some of those quarter note passages that were in there, I can't remember where they were. These passages that happen here, this all feels more like E flat major, except it doesn't because there's other things going on. I'm just looking at the melody. There's places of this where it kind of felt like the tonal center was neither E flat nor C, and that really it felt more like it was a Phrygian sound with G as a tonal area or a D as a tonal area or something like that. So I'm not sure if you were consciously thinking about these things, but the way some of the lines worked out. I think it's just the way that we have this kind of wall of sound of pitches that aren't telling a story in terms of triads. And because it's not telling a story in terms of triads, it doesn't necessarily, no single pitch necessarily asserts itself as the tonal center uh, in the way that it would if the triad story were being told more consistently. And I'm not saying it should be. What I am saying is it does feel like there's a tonal shift area in this modal sense of the word, in this sort of Renaissance sense of the same pitches but cadencing in different places, cadencing to a C in one place, cadencing to an E flat somewhere else. And I definitely feel like if you consciously took that further and actually created literal cadences into some of the other pitches within your pitch set here, that could have been interesting also, without actually leaving that set of pitches, but choosing different ones to be the final for different phrases, which is a very Renaissance thing again. That could have created some interest, but also actually just changing key, like changing from this key of three flats to the key of, whatever, two sharps or whatever else could have been interesting as another textural thing to play with. Um, so yeah, this passage here with the repeated G. So there's a repeating thing happening here in the pattern, and I see the oboe C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C. It's walking up the scale, right? And then the second oboe has that same pattern starting two beats later. So we have this counterpoint that's happening there. And then the English horn has that same pattern starting two beats later. So we have this counterpoint that's happening, and it's essentially, again, telling a very tonal story, or very not tonal, but within a tonal area or modal, whatever. It's one key center. You're not changing the intervals. You're not introducing accidentals, is maybe the best way of saying it. So we're talking about one tonal area that's happening here. So that sort of thing of using this counterpoint in there definitely increases interest in here. And I kind of would be interested to find out if the da-da-dum bum, da-da-dum bum, like that figure in itself probably could have benefited from more of that. So you have places where you are changing around, like here, that ba-da-dum bum starts on beat two, right? And then you're slowing it down, eighth notes and triplets. So let's listen to that for a second. We've got that done, right? And that bop bop bump ba da dum bump, those little pickups into it. So these are the kind of variations you do have going, and I definitely like those variations. I think they add a lot. Again, I would be looking to see how much more of that you could do that didn't defeat the purpose of keeping it about the constancy of the virus in our lives for the last year while other things change. And so figuring out how to play that game, where that balance is, that's some of the things that I would be looking at. Um, if I were to think about how to further develop this piece. Or, you can definitely call it done as it is, because it works really nicely as it is. But I always figure if someone's going to put pieces up here for comment, that I would, talk about some other choices that could be made, and then you take that information either into this piece or another piece. I do like the fact that then the meter of the piece changes as a feel. Although I would say the way the piece works, it didn't establish a meter for me that much anyhow. It's really a flow of beats. It's like the bar lines were almost afterthoughts, and whether you call this 4/4 and this 6/4 or whatever you're going to call it, it doesn't sound that different to me. Now the tempo change, the swing, is definitely a difference. Right? I'm aware of one, 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 one. Now I'm aware of. I know that the music stopped there in that 4/4 bar, but I couldn't really tell the difference between 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 and 6 in here, and in part that's because of the counterpoint that's happening. And this is why a lot of Renaissance music would be written without time signatures, because it's kind of pointless. You have a flow of beats, but you have different lines entering at different times, but saying, the oboe one starting here, oboe two starting here, oboe three starting there, and yet telling largely, they're saying the same thing melodically, but starting at a different place within the measure. Well, who's to say that this guy is one and that guy is three and this guy is five, right? That's kind of arbitrary, really, especially given that this da da dum bum is starting on two here or starting on six here. So yes, it's a form of hemiola, but there isn't anything happening that's so strongly telling me where one is that I even hear it as a hemiola exactly. I really just hear it as a undifferentiated sequence of beats. Again, a very Renaissance-y thing. And it's also a modern thing for sure. Um, it's a very ambient music kind of thing also. I think I've got the right word in there. Anyhow, electronic music, certain kinds of electronic music would have a steady sense of a beat, but not a steady sense of a pulse in sense of knowing where beat one was, as opposed to just being steady beats. So I feel like that is going really well. The way there's this, because I'm not pointing this out to say, oh well, you have to have a steady beat or you have to have a sense of one. No, I'm actually saying it's good that you don't. I like the flow of this, the sense that it's this flow of beats, because life doesn't divide itself up into. I mean, I guess we have days. We divide up into days and weeks, but week that everything except a day is artificial. A day is real, a year is real, but a week, that's a made up thing. A month, that's a made up thing. Okay, yeah, a month kind of corresponds to what happens with the moon, but really, yeah, that's like, it doesn't even correspond exactly, right? Because the lunar cycle is shorter than our cycle. um so it's not that, it's not that important of a thing to our lives really, other than that we've made it one. So I wouldn't be trying to like model weeks or days or months in here. Days maybe, but then you're getting so literal with your program, it's barely worth it. So anyhow, these are some of my observations that I'm hearing here. I especially like the stuff that happens at the end, where you're like, okay, I gotta wrap this thing up somehow and introduce some material. So I just want to play that ending part again. So yeah, what happens here at the end is this nice sense of the ba-da-dum-bum kind of decrescendoing here, or diminuendoing, and it becomes less insistent. Still there, it's less insistent, and then we become much more aware of the music happening on top. And now it is a very clear tonal story being told, and by tonal now I mean in the traditional sense of chords, five leading to one. And I see also a comment about 3/2. Yeah, I called it 6/4, but you're right, I didn't actually read to see what it said. But in Renaissance music, quarter notes were seldom thought of. Well, I shouldn't say seldom thought of. Much music was written with a half note as the basic pulse. The half note is your main unit. You would very rarely put lyrics to quarter notes. The quarter notes would be there for melisma purpose. Ba la, half note, half note, half note, quarter, quarter, quarter. It might be Agnus Dei, and I'm just making stuff up. But the point is that the main flow would be half notes and not quarter notes. So I think that's what the comment is about the 3/2 versus 6/4. I didn't actually see if this was written, but these rhythms, um, I don't. Yeah, I would call these are not 3/2 rhythms. But if we wanted to be more Renaissancey about it, we'd call it 3/2 instead of 6/4. But these rhythms are not Renaissancey rhythms. So yeah, that's. But that is a good, since I brought up the Renaissance. Absolutely, 3/2 would be common. But then you would only use the 3/2 if you really intended to have that regular repeating fall of the bar lines, and that passage didn't feel that much to me. So yeah, I like the way this kind of winds down by de-emphasizing the virus motif while not losing it entirely, because that's, I think, the story being told in our lives right now. But then the rest of the story of our lives taking a stronger prominence, starting from right around here, basically. So yeah, that's all comes together to a really nice conclusion. And I see people are talking about the use of the hidden staves. So one thing you'll notice is, yeah, there are a number of pages like here where there's a lot of empty staves. There's basically two kinds of scores in the world. There's study scores and there's performance scores. Study scores would absolutely, so within MuseScore, even if I can't play you the piece within MuseScore, I can certainly show it to you and show you, if you're not aware, for people who aren't aware already, um, this is what this score looks like right now, and you can see that all the pages are full. If I go to Format, Style, and then turn on Hide Empty Staves here, this is on the score, the first tab there. You'll see now that some of the pages have become a little bit shorter because there were only a few empty staves, but on some pages, we actually managed to fit two systems on one page. This system here was pretty full, starting at measure 59, but then uh, we hit the end of that, and then the next system had fewer staves, and MuseScore was able to put it all on one page. I was able to spot that by looking at the bar line that disappearing there. But if you're going to use hide empty staves in a way that allows multiple systems, and here again we have two systems fitting on this page. There's probably some places, looks like here, I can't really tell. I have to zoom in a little more. There might be some places where there's more than two systems on the page. Anyhow, it's a little bit hard, even when you zoom in, to tell that there's two systems on the page. So when you do that, in any score where that's going to be an issue, there's another setting you want to turn on, and that's under the system. So that was Format, Style, and then System. You want to turn on the dividers. So you can either put them on the left or the right or both. I'll just put them on the left. That's these little slash marks. Now you'll easily be able to tell, even zoomed way out, where there is in fact more than one system on a page. And the answer is just those two pages. It's the only place it happened. But all the more reason to want the dividers, because if it happened on every page, we'd sort of get used to it and anticipate it. But when it just randomly shows up on one or two pages, it would be easy to miss otherwise. So if you turn on hide empty staves on a score like this, I'd recommend also turning on the dividers for any large scale score like this. So yeah, so again, I apologize for the technical difficulties at the beginning, and I guess I know what I'm dealing with this afternoon. Is trying to figure out what happened with my system update that killed my sound on MuseScore. Probably since MuseScore is a Linux app, I'm going to guess that it killed sound for Linux as a whole, and I need to turn on some driver or something. But I don't know. I will sort that out. Meanwhile, well, you got to see me sit at the piano for a little bit. I could really play the thing, I really can, but not so much when I'm sight reading and turning sideways and all. So that's why I didn't play more than I did. All right, so next week, just I'm going to take a look at some more of the music that's been submitted. And since Chick Corea was mentioned, yeah, I think I would love to talk about Chick Corea and his music a little bit. So I'll find something to talk about having to do with Chick next week. But as always, whatever music anyone has submitted, I'm happy to sort of pick the I don't want to say pick the best of what's submitted necessarily, because I want to be able to take, really, like this is a beautiful, wonderfully conceived, well executed work. This is an ambitious piece, and I know a lot of people this is like way beyond what some people might be able to put together. But that doesn't mean I don't want to take some of people's first attempts and give feedback on those also. So I'm always wanting to take some, really big, successful, sort of professionally presented pieces like this one, and also take some pieces of people who are just getting started and figuring some things out. And so that's why I want to take a look at that one piece that I very briefly showed you, someone who posted essentially his first piece ever. So is version 4 going to have the major interface? Yeah, so there is going to be a pretty big update to the MuseScore interface for MuseScore 4. It's not necessarily going to be everything all at once. They're now looking at MuseScore 4 kind of being a stage thing, but what the sort of big change is sort of a rewrite of the user interface code. everything about how the user interface is drawn right now in MuseScore uses a library called Qt, or Qt as it's supposed to be pronounced. And the way the icons look, everything about how the stuff is drawn, how things respond to mouse clicks, is going to be, or is been rewritten using QML, which is another language produced by the same people, the Qt people, but they've made it more flexible and able to do other things, and so it's going to look and behave differently in terms of just how things respond, which things required single clicks versus double clicks. So there's a lot of stuff that's going to change without really having changed internally, but just look different. And then some things will actually look quite a bit different. One of the big changes that you can expect is to the inspector. So the inspector right now, when you select something, it shows you all these controls, and it's sort of this potentially confusing mishmash of different settings depending on what kind of thing you've selected. This is all going to be kind of simplified and streamlined in for MuseScore 4. So that's something definitely to look forward to. All right. So again, guys, great job on this. And yeah, I enjoyed listening to it, enjoyed kind of digging a little bit into some of the stuff going on in it. And by all means, everyone, keep submitting your music, and I will join you next time. And with maybe I'll have some theme music, maybe I won't, I don't know. But I definitely plan to soon. So I will see everyone next time. Thanks again for being here.